A controversial trend in Britain's courts is drawing sharp criticism from politicians, campaigners, and members of the public, after a number of migrants convicted of serious sexual offences have argued that trauma experienced before arriving in the UK should be taken into account when judges hand down their sentences. Recent reports suggest an emerging trend of suspects who have submitted post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD diagnosis, as part of their legal defence, with the aim of securing shorter prison terms for crimes including rape and sexual assault. In several noticeable cases, psychiatric reports assessing trauma have been presented alongside evidence of violent offending. 42-year-old Abdul Rahman Adnan Abulela raped a woman in London's Hyde Park in 2024. He told a court that he suffered from borderline emotionally unstable personality disorder and PTSD as a result of experiences in his homeland of Egypt. The Daily Mail reported that Abulela had previously been convicted in Egypt as being part of a bomb-making cell and sentenced to 7 years in prison there in 2015. In the UK, the judge ultimately sentenced him to 8.5 years. Syrian migrant Hassan Abu Hayleh was convicted in November 2024 of sexually assaulting a 19-year-old woman in Weymouth, Dorset, during 2022. His legal team argued he was suffering from severe and chronic PTSD, and that prison would amount to a violation of his human rights. Recently, two 17-year-old Afghan teenagers who arrived on small boats, Jan Jahanzeb and Isra Niazal, were locked up for raping a 15-year-old girl in Leamington Spa. Both claim to have suffered from mental health problems as a result of life experiences back home in Afghanistan. Senior politicians are saying that this trend raises serious questions about how trauma is being weighed against the severity of crimes, particularly in cases of sexual violence. Some argue that while trauma assessments have a place in understanding a defendant's background, they should not diminish the seriousness of offences that have lifelong impacts on victims. Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp was among those voicing concern, describing the use of unverified trauma claims in sentencing hearings as an insult to victims, and warning it could undermine public confidence in the justice system. In an interview with The Times, he said that illegal migrants who rape young women should get a full prison sentence and then be deported, regardless of any asylum or human rights claim. He added that it's an insult to victims that these illegal migrants are using unverifiable and potentially made-up claims about past trauma to excuse rape and reduce their prison sentences. Our justice system should have no truck with this nonsense. Recent Ministry of Justice figures indicate that foreign nationals accounted for around a quarter of sexual assault convictions involving women in the UK, a statistic that has been highlighted in debates about crime and immigration policy. This broader context has fueled calls from some quarters for tougher immigration and criminal justice measures, including reforms that would make it harder for foreign nationals convicted of serious crimes to remain in the UK. Judges are obliged under UK sentencing guidelines to consider all relevant evidence, including mental health assessments. In practice, this means that psychiatric reports can influence the length and type of sentence imposed. However, the guidelines also stress that public protection and the seriousness of the offence must remain central, particularly in cases involving sexual violence. The Home Office is now pursuing legislative changes aimed at stripping refugee protections from migrants convicted of sexual offences, part of a wider overhaul of asylum and immigration laws. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has publicly stated that the human rights of foreign sex offenders have been prioritised over the safety of British girls. The Home Secretary has pledged to set up special teams to tackle serious sexual offences as part of what the government is branding the largest crackdown on violence against women and girls in British history.
This video is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Protect yourself this Christmas with one of the best VPNs out there. Cybercriminals are out to get your bank account information while you do your Christmas shopping online. But you can protect your privacy, money, and identity now with ExpressVPN for as little as 8 pence a day. Click the link now to claim up to 75% off.
Most people will just be astounded. It's quite an admission, isn't it, that actually it is recognisable that the human rights of sex offenders, foreign sex offenders, have been higher than those of the women and girls that they may have abused. It's terrifying.
Yes, and this has long been a source of frustration for governments, but in particular voters. And one of the real flashpoints around the immigration system, that when someone is convicted of serious, very severe wrongdoing, it can be very difficult to remove them from the country. And in doing so, it obviously opens up the risk of greater offending from them the longer they stay here. So I think a lot of people would be very welcome to see this approach, but the question is, can it be made to work?
John, reading statistics about violence against women and girls this morning, and it's saying here 1 in 4 women in England and Wales will experience domestic abuse in their lifetime. Now, obviously, violence against women and girls is a huge, huge issue, and I think that stat just shows it, doesn't it? So, some people might say that, this is a great start, that the Home Sec is making good headway, but a lot of other people are going to say that it doesn't go far enough. When we're reading statistics like that, 1 in 4 women experiencing violence or domestic abuse in their lifetime, it's not going far enough, a lot of people will be saying.
Absolutely. And one of the things that is mixed in here is this is a huge societal issue, and we've seen in particular from the reports following the Sarah Everard case, a lot of police forces have been dealing with this very badly. Crimes aren't necessarily being properly recorded, aren't necessarily being properly investigated. So this goes far beyond simply removals. It's about how our institutions engage with this, and ultimately sort of how we as a society engage with this issue, and how it gets driven out at every level.
It just goes to show, though, how this is an issue when it comes to immigration, illegal immigration, foreign offenders, deportations, all the rest of it. And the big problem, the one thing it comes down to, seems to be ECHR. Reform says they'll get rid of it. Tories say they'll get rid of it. Labour have been to a big conference and come back. Yvette Cooper sort of saying, well, yes, we're going to look at reforming elements of it. It's not necessarily going to wash with the public, that, is it?
It depends, what results they get, and other countries in Europe are far more successful at deporting people they want to deport. But also, it should be remembered that when we're looking at this issue, a huge amount of domestic violence happens. Domestic violence happens within the home. It happens across a lot of societies, and this is only one part of trying to drag down those statistics. And in particular, worth remembering that a lot of sexual abuse is familial as well.
Obviously, we're talking this morning as well about the migrant crossings on the Channel. It looked like it was going to be a win for the government, 28 days with none. I was reading on X, people saying, oh, they've finally done it, they've stopped the boats. But then, of course, yesterday we saw the news that it's now gone over 40,000. Do you think this will be a big blow for Sir Keir Starmer and his government?
I don't think it will be a huge blow. I think, obviously, the crossing numbers have gone up a bit this year, but ultimately, these things take time to solve. They're very dependent on things like the weather, things like seasonal changes. I think really the government is going to be trying to look at next year and if they can keep these flows reduced next year. I think that's going to be more of a focus than necessarily where exactly the numbers have ended up this year. We know they fluctuate year on year. It's going to be far more about the trend going through next year and the year after towards the general election.
Oh, heck, yeah, that's a long time to wait for this all to continue, isn't it, John? Thanks very much.